Comrades, workers, brothers and sisters in struggle, let us begin by shattering the greatest illusion of our age, the belief that the world we inhabit is natural, eternal, and unchangeable. The rulers of capital would have you think that society's order is as fixed as the stars, that your suffering is necessary, and that their domination is inevitable. I tell you now, nothing could be further from the truth. The foundations of this social order are neither divine nor immutable. They are built by your hands, sustained by your labour, and can be overturned by your collective will. Today, we expose a truth the ruling class desperately hides. The twofold character of labour, the secret pulse of capitalist production, the key that unlocks the mystery of exploitation, and the weapon that can arm the working class with revolutionary clarity. Comrades, to penetrate the inner workings of the capitalist system, one must begin with the simplest element of its structure, the commodity. For the commodity is not merely a thing, it is the cell form of the social organism, and within it lies a contradiction that determines the fate of millions. Every commodity bears within it two faces, two dimensions of human labour that appear unified, yet conceal opposite truths. Understanding this duality is not an academic exercise. It is the key to unveiling the mechanism through which the working class is bound, drained, and dominated. Let us begin with the first dimension, concrete labour. This is the living, breathing activity of human beings, transforming nature. It is the carpenter shaping wood, the machinist guiding steel, the seamstress turning cloth into garments, the coder crafting digital systems, the farmer cultivating the soil. These acts are purposeful and creative. They yield use values, objects that satisfy human needs and desires. Concrete labour is as old as humanity itself. It is the essence of our species, our ability to shape the world with intention. But capitalism does not stop at usefulness. It cannot. It does not care how fine the shoe is, how nutritious the bread is, how elegant the garment is. The system is indifferent to the human craft and the needs of society. For capitalism demands not only that objects be useful, but that they be exchangeable, that they yield profit. And to achieve this, labour must be stripped of its individuality, reduced to a single uniform substance, abstract labour. Here lies the second dimension of labour, the sheer expenditure of human effort, indifferent to skill, passion, or purpose. It is labour measured only by time, homogenized across millions of workers who may never see the products they create. Whereas concrete labour produces use values, abstract labour produces value, the quantitative magnitude that governs the movement of capital. The clock becomes the master. The worker's life is carved into hours and minutes. All personality, all artistry, all creativity is flattened into a mass of interchangeable labour power. This reduction of labour to abstract value is the precondition for exploitation. For when the capitalist purchases labour power, they are not buying the full fruits of the worker's effort. They buy only the worker's capacity to work for a fixed period. But the value produced during that period is far greater than the value of the worker's subsistence, the food, housing, clothing, and minimal comforts necessary for the worker to remain alive and able to work again the next day. The portion of the working day required to reproduce the worker's wages is only a fraction. The remaining hours, the surplus labour time, produce value that the worker never receives. This surplus is the source of profit, the heartbeat of the system. It is extracted silently, relentlessly, behind the facade of equal exchange. The capitalist proclaims that wages are fair compensation for labour, but wages compensate only a fraction of the labour performed. It is as if the worker labours for two masters, one visible and one hidden. The visible one hands over wages, the hidden one pockets the surplus. And this entire sleight of hand is made possible only because labour possesses this twofold character. Without it, the capitalist could not disguise exploitation as exchange. The dual nature of labour enables the great illusion of the marketplace, the idea that workers and capitalists meet as equals. The worker comes with labour power, the capitalist comes with money. They exchange equivalents, or so it seems. But in truth, the moment labour power is consumed, it produces more value than it costs. The capitalist pays for its daily maintenance, but appropriates its creative power. Thus, the worker sells the ability to produce value, but not the value itself. That remains with the capitalist. Comrades, once this duality is understood, the entire architecture of capitalism stands exposed. The conflict between those who labor and those who own becomes not moral, not accidental, but structural. The workers' impoverishment and the capitalist's accumulation are two sides of the same process. The wealth of one class grows in direct proportion to the unpaid labor of the other. To comprehend the dual nature of labor is to see the capitalist system not as a neutral arrangement, but as a machine engineered to extract surplus from living human beings. It reveals exploitation not as an ethical failing, but as an economic necessity. And once this truth is grasped, the path forward becomes unmistakable. The working class must seize control of the very process through which value is created, abolishing the conditions that transform their labor into chains. For only when labor is no longer divided into concrete usefulness for society and abstract value for capital will humanity begin its true liberation. Comrades, if one wishes to understand the true structure of society under capitalism, one must begin not with laws or institutions, but with the seemingly ordinary world of commodities. For it is here, in the quiet exchange of objects on the market, that the grand deception of the age unfolds. The commodity appears simple, familiar, harmless, yet it is the veil beneath which the exploitation of millions is concealed. What stands before us as a material object is in fact a social relation wearing a mask. A commodity is an object produced for exchange. But in the capitalist system, this simple fact becomes the foundation of an entire ideological universe. The commodity does not come to us announcing its origins. It does not proclaim, "I am the product of human hands, of human suffering, of human ingenuity." Instead, it appears as an independent being, endowed with life and motion of its own, confronting human beings as though it were they who depend on it, not the other way around. In this world, relations between people assume the form of relations between things. The worker who labors for 14 hours a day becomes invisible, while the product of that labor stands forth as an autonomous entity. The commodity acquires a mysterious quality, seeming to carry within itself the very laws that govern society. Prices fluctuate, markets crash, fortunes rise and fall, and all of it seems to happen as though dictated by the commodities themselves, as if they were alive, as if they possessed wills, as if human beings were merely spectators. This is the great masquerade of capitalism, social relations disguised as object relations. In this inverted world, the worker sees not the capitalist who exploits, but the wage that appears to compensate. The consumer sees not the toil of the worker, but the glittering commodity on the shelf. And the capitalist sees not the flesh and blood people whose labor sustains them, but only costs, units, and values to be minimized and maximized. The commodity world is a world of illusions, a theater where every object conceals a hidden script of domination. Why does this happen? Because the commodity emerges from a system in which human labor is divided, fragmented, and alienated. When producers do not control the conditions of their own labor, they cannot see themselves in the products they create. The objects they produce do not belong to them. They confront them as alien things. And once these objects enter the market, they move in ways no individual can control. They are governed by the abstract laws of value, competition, exchange, and profit laws that dominate both worker and capitalist alike. Yet these laws are nothing more than the collective result of human labor, mediated through the commodity form. They seem natural only because they are universal. But their universality is not proof of their necessity, it is proof of how deeply exploitation has penetrated the social fabric. Comrades, imagine a world in which humans relate to one another directly, where the products of labor appear transparently as the outcome of cooperative effort. Such a society would reveal the true nature of things. That value is created by labor, that wealth is born from collective effort, and that our relations are social before they are economic. But under capitalism, such clarity is forbidden. Instead, the commodity world presents itself as the ultimate authority. It dictates what is produced and what is not, who eats and who starves, who lives in luxury and who dies in poverty. Decisions that should be rooted in human need are instead subordinated to the cold calculus of exchange value. Thus, things rule over people. In this system, Even the worker becomes a commodity. Their labour power is bought and sold like any other product. Their value is determined not by their humanity, but by the socially necessary labour time required to keep them alive enough to work another day. The worker becomes an object, a tool subject to the same forces that govern the commodities they produce. And so, the commodity form does more than obscure exploitation. It transforms human beings into appendages of the market. It masks the violence of wage labour with the appearance of equality. It hides the class struggle behind the neutrality of exchange. It makes the domination of one class over another appear as the simple movement of things. To tear away this mask is an act of revolutionary clarity. Once the working class recognizes that the commodity world is not natural but constructed, built on their labour and sustained by their exploitation, the spell begins to break. The mystification dissolves, the illusion collapses, and what stands revealed is the raw truth, that behind every commodity lies the living labour of the oppressed, and behind every market exchange lies a structure of domination. Comrades, we must not remain spectators in the theatre of commodities. We must seize the stage, tear down the masks, and expose the relations of power they hide. Only then can human beings reclaim control over their own social existence and step into a world where people, not products, determine the course of history. Comrades, to grasp the heartbeat of society under capitalism, one must not look to the lofty speeches of politicians nor the tranquil surface of daily life. One must look to the factory floor, the crowded office, the gig workers' endless toil, the sweat of miners, the exhaustion of caregivers, the precarity of the unemployed. It is here, in the lived experience of millions, that the fundamental truth emerges. Society is split into two great hostile camps, locked in a struggle that defines every moment of our existence. This conflict is not a misunderstanding. It is not the result of personal greed or individual cruelty. It is a structural antagonism rooted in the very foundations of capitalist production. One class owns the means by which society produces its factories, its machinery, its land, its digital infrastructure. The other owns nothing but its labour power, which it must sell to survive. From this basic relation flows the entire drama of exploitation and resistance. Let us examine this relation closely. The capitalist does not enter the labour contract seeking equality. They seek profit extracted not from objects but from living human beings. They press wages downward, extend the working day, intensify the pace of labour, and introduce machinery to control and discipline the workforce. At every turn, they strive to increase surplus labour, the unpaid labour that becomes their wealth. The worker, by contrast, fights simply to maintain life, to win better wages, shorten the working day, improve conditions, secure stability. In every demand, no matter how small, lies the seed of resistance. Even the struggle for a few coins more, for a few minutes less, is an act that challenges the domination of capital. This is class struggle, the ceaseless confrontation between those who live by labour and those who live by appropriating the labour of others. Some say such conflict can be reconciled, that the interests of worker and capitalist can be harmonized through goodwill or reform. Yet every crisis exposes the falsehood of this fantasy. When profits fall, wages are slashed. When competition intensifies, layoffs multiply. When technology advances, it is not used to lighten the burden of labour, but to replace workers or tighten discipline. Even productivity gains achieved through the sweat of the worker become weapons against them, increasing exploitation rather than diminishing it. The capitalist must exploit to survive. The worker must resist to live. No treaty can abolish what the structure of society demands. And the contradiction extends far beyond the workplace. Entire nations are drawn into the same antagonism. The wealth of imperialist states rests on the cheap labour and raw materials extracted from oppressed regions. Wars are waged not for ideals, but for markets and profits. Economic crises sweep across continents, destroying livelihoods, while vast fortunes are preserved through state support for capital. In every sphere, political, economic, cultural, the class struggle shapes reality. The laws that govern society are written to protect property, not people. The media serves to normalize exploitation, telling workers that their suffering is natural, inevitable, even deserved. Schools teach obedience more effectively than mathematics. And when workers rise, the state reveals its true character not as a neutral arbiter, but as the armed guardian of capital. Yet despite this immense machinery of domination, the ruling class lives in constant fear. They fear the strike. They fear the union. They fear the spontaneous uprising of those they exploit. They fear every moment of collective defiance, every whisper of solidarity, every act in which workers recognize their shared condition. For the moment, workers see themselves not as isolated individuals, but as a class. That moment marks the beginning of the end of the entire capitalist order. Why do they fear this? Because when workers unite, the power of capital shatters. The working class produces everything: food, homes, transportation, clothing, medicine, technology, infrastructure. Remove the capitalist for a day and society continues. Remove the worker for a day and society grinds to a halt. The real power of history lies not in boardrooms but in labour itself. Once workers understand this, once they see the twofold character of their labour, the masked relations of the commodity world, and the nature of their exploitation, the illusion of capitalist inevitability dissolves. They realize that the wealth of the ruling class is nothing but the accumulated product of their own unpaid labour. They realize that the chains that bind them are of human making and therefore can be broken. And with this realization comes a profound shift. The oppressed becomes the revolutionary subject. What was once resignation becomes defiance. What was once acceptance becomes anger. What was once isolation becomes solidarity. The class struggle is not a chapter of history, it is the force that drives history. It is the storm beneath every calm, the fire beneath every crisis, the engine that will one day bring the capitalist mode of production crashing to the ground. Comrades, let us not fear this struggle, let us embrace it. For in uncovering the truth of class antagonism, we do not merely diagnose the sickness of the world, we discover the path to its liberation. Comrades, the moment has come to speak plainly and without hesitation. The world cannot and will not change itself. No ruling class has ever surrendered power voluntarily, no system of exploitation has ever dissolved through polite requests, and no worker has ever been freed by the goodwill of their oppressor. History advances only when the oppressed join hands, recognize their power, and act. And today, more than ever, the working class everywhere, in every nation, in every industry, must rise to the task. We live in an age where the contradiction between labour and capital has reached an intolerable intensity. The wealth of society grows to monstrous proportions, yet the conditions of those who produce that wealth grow ever more precarious. Technology capable of reducing toil instead deepens exploitation. Productivity soars, yet wages stagnate. A handful of oligarchs hoard unimaginable riches while millions struggle for food, housing, healthcare, dignity. This is not a natural disaster. It is not the result of chance. It is the product of a system designed to enrich the few at the expense of the many. And so, the call before us is not a whisper but a thunderclap. Workers of the world, organize. Without organization, the working class remains fragmented, isolated, and powerless. With organization, it becomes a force capable of reshaping the world. Let us examine what it means to organize. It begins when workers in a single workplace, once divided by fear, suspicion, or competition, recognize their shared condition. It begins when the machinist sees in the warehouse worker, the nurse, the teacher, the programmer, not a rival but a comrade. It begins when workers understand that their struggle is not against one another, but against the system that pits them against one another. Organization transforms isolated grievances into collective demands. It converts hidden anger into public action. It turns the powerless many into a unified force. Yet, comrades, organization must go beyond the workplace. It must span industries, cities, nations. For the capitalist class is already global. Their money moves across borders, their factories stretch across continents, their power reaches into every corner of the earth. To fight them, the working class must be no less united. Inside every factory, every platform, every office building, every field, there exists a silent majority whose labour sustains the world. If these workers act together, if they strike, if they resist, If they seize control over the processes by which their own lives are shaped, then the entire system trembles. For what is the power of capital? It is not rooted in the personal strength of the capitalist. It is not rooted in their intelligence, nor their virtue, nor their merit. The power of capital is based entirely on the labour of the working class. Remove that labour, and the mighty palaces of wealth collapse into dust. This is why the ruling class fears worker organisation above all else. They fear unions, they fear councils, they fear assemblies, they fear any structure that enables workers to speak with one voice. They fear solidarity because solidarity is the seed of liberation. And yet, comrades, we must be equally clear, organisation is not enough if it remains timid or half-hearted. The goal cannot be mere survival within the confines of the existing order. The goal must be to transform society from its foundations to seize control of production, abolish exploitation, and create a world free from the domination of capital. Every struggle for better wages, shorter hours, safer conditions is a step in this direction. Every strike teaches workers their collective power. Every protest exposes the weakness of the ruling class. Every victory, no matter how small, sharpens the consciousness of the working class and prepares it for greater battles. But the decisive moment will arrive when workers recognize their power not only to resist, but to govern. When they understand that the factories, the farms, the hospitals, the schools, the transport networks, all the machinery of society rightfully belong to those who make them run. When they realize that they, and only they, can reorganize production to serve human need instead of profit. Comrades, the time for hesitation is over. The crises of capitalism, economic, political, environmental, grow deeper by the day. The ruling class has no solution but repression, austerity, and division. They will divide worker against worker, citizen against migrant, race against race, nation against nation, anything to prevent unity among the oppressed. We must reject these divisions with all the strength of our collective being. For the working class has no nation but the world, no interest but emancipation, no future but the one it builds with its own hands. Workers of every land, rise, unite, organize. Your chains are many, but your power is greater still. The future demands your courage. The present demands your action. The time is now. Comrades, the time has come to cast aside all illusions, to tear the veil from the corrupted edifice of this social order, and to confront reality with unflinching clarity. For we stand at a decisive moment not only in the history of labour, but in the history of humanity itself. The contradictions of capitalism have matured. Its crises deepen, its promises decay. What once appeared as progress now reveals itself as destruction. What was heralded as freedom has become dependency. And the wealth that glitters at the top of society shines only because it rests on the exhausted bodies of millions. The present system cannot be mended. It cannot be reformed into justice. It is incapable of offering liberation. It must be transformed fundamentally, structurally, completely. The call before us is not for cosmetic change, not for minor improvements or temporary relief. It is a call to overturn the relations of domination at their roots, to abolish exploitation in all its forms, and to build a society worthy of human dignity. For exploitation is not an accident, it is the cornerstone upon which capital stands. It will persist so long as the working class remains separated from the means of production, so long as the fruits of labour belong not to those who create them, but to those who own by decree and profit by inheritance. Revolutionary transformation begins with consciousness, the realization that the world we inhabit is not natural, not fixed, not eternal. It is a human construction, built through labour, maintained through submission, and thus capable of being reshaped through collective struggle. Once workers grasp that they themselves are the creators of social wealth, that their labour drives the engines of history, the ideological chains begin to crack. But consciousness alone is insufficient. Knowledge must ignite will. Understanding must become action. The path of revolutionary transformation demands the unity of the working class, unity across workplaces, industries, nations. It demands solidarity that crosses borders, defies divisions, and rejects every attempt of the ruling class to pit worker against worker. For the oppressors maintain their power not merely through wealth and force, but through fragmentation, through the isolation of individuals who are told they stand alone. Let us be clear. The working class does not stand alone. It stands as the majority of humanity, bound by common conditions, common suffering, and common aspirations. The moment this majority recognizes itself as a class, as a collective subject of history, the balance of power shifts irreversibly. Revolutionary transformation also demands organization, not chaotic outbursts, but disciplined, strategic, uncompromising structures built by and for the workers themselves. Councils, unions, committees, assemblies, organs of collective power that reflect the will of the masses rather than the decrees of a ruling minority. Through such organization, the working class develops the capacity not only to resist exploitation, but to govern society. For the question before us is not merely how to destroy the old, but how to build the new. And what does this new world require? It demands that production be reorganized to serve human need, not profit. That the surplus created by labor be reinvested into communal well-being, housing, healthcare, education, culture, rather than siphoned into private fortunes. That technology be used to reduce toil, not intensify it. That the earth be preserved, not plundered. That democracy extend not only to the ballot box, but to the very places where people spend their lives, the workplaces, the infrastructure systems, the communities where decisions shape fate. Such a transformation is not a utopian dream, it is the logical resolution of the contradictions of capitalism. The old system is already collapsing under its own weight. Economic crises spiral. Inequality reaches monstrous proportions. Ecological destruction threatens the survival of future generations, and every solution offered by the ruling class only worsens the disease. In such a moment, neutrality is impossible. To stand still is to consent to decline. To wait is to condemn future generations to deeper misery. The world cries out for change, real change, structural change, revolutionary change. Comrades, the hour of transformation approaches. Do not underestimate your power. Every movement in history has been shaped by those who were told they were powerless. Every revolution has been made by hands hardened by labor and voices long denied. Every liberation has grown from the courage of those who understood that obedience is death and that resistance is life. Let us abandon fear. Let us rise with clarity and determination. Let us break the chains of exploitation and take hold of the means through which society is built. The world is ours to remake. The future is ours to seize. Rise, organize, transform. For the time of revolutionary action is now. Comrades, we have torn aside the veils that conceal the true architecture of our world. We have exposed the dual character of labor, the secret engine of exploitation. We have revealed the commodity as a mask that hides human suffering beneath the glitter of objects. We have laid bare the ceaseless conflict between those who labor and those who live from the labor of others. And we have affirmed that only the organized power of the working class can break the chains that bind humanity to the machinery of capital. The truth is unmistakable. The world we inhabit is built upon our labor, yet controlled by forces that seek only to dominate. Nothing will change unless we rise to change it. No savior will descend from the heights of wealth or power. No reform granted from above will alter the foundation of this system. The oppressed have only themselves and each other, but that is enough. More than enough. It is everything. For the working class is not a victim to be pitied, but a force to be awakened. It is the heart of production, the mind of society, the engine of history. When it acts not for itself alone, but for all humanity, for the creation of a world free from exploitation, free from alienation, free from the rule of profit over life. The path ahead will not be simple. The ruling class will resist with all the power at its command. They will sow division, spread fear, manufacture lies. They will cling to their privileges with desperate ferocity. But no structure of domination, however fortified, can withstand the united will of the millions whose labor sustains it. Comrades, we stand at a crossroads. One road leads deeper into crisis, misery, inequality, and ecological ruin. The other leads toward liberation, toward a society where the fruits of labor belong to those who create them, where human beings stand in transparent relations with one another, where cooperation replaces competition, and where the development of each becomes the condition for the development of all. Choose the second road. Walk it with courage. Walk it together. The future has not yet been written. It awaits the hands that will shape it and the voices that will demand it. Asterisk, asterisk, workers of the world, stand up. Organize. Reclaim what is yours. Write the next chapter of history with your own hands. The time for revolutionary action is not tomorrow, it is now.